Hello everyone, my name is Casey McCarl and I am a future environmental educator. So I'm going to be sharing with you my vision statement for being the best possible educator that I can be. So I aim to teach all types of learners about the importance of protecting our planet. So I will value the culture, background, and experiences that all of my students bring to the learning environment. In my learning environment, I expect to teach a variety of learners from all walks of life. I know that my students will be diverse in ethnicity, race, socioeconomic background, and more. I aim to teach my students in a multicultural learning environment that values and respects each student for who they are. While learning about the natural environment, my students will implicitly learn about physical activity and take part in it, while learning about plants, wildlife, and exploring the world around them. We learned that hidden curriculum is the unwritten, unofficial, and often unintended lessons, values, and perspectives that students learn in school. It is so important to stay active, and a great way to do so is by exploring the outdoors. When there is hidden curriculum in my teaching, I will be sure that it is not biased or stereotypical, and that it only provides positive outcomes for my students. So when it comes to learning environments and the concepts of space, place, and material culture, I will be sure to create a classroom environment that is suitable for all of my students. So my goal is to create a learning environment where all of my students feel welcomed, happy, safe, and free to explore and discover. As a future environmental educator, the learning environment that I hope to foster will only have some similarities to a traditional classroom setting. I really hope to utilize the great outdoors as much as possible with my students. I want to conduct most of my lessons outside, where my students can complete hands-on learning activities and get their hands dirty. So whether learning activities take place indoors or outdoors, the space that I hope to create is a safe learning environment. So I'll be sure to keep in mind important elements such as lighting, classroom setup, spacing, and I will also incorporate tons of material culture that gives insight into the culture of my learning environment. As an educator, I will work continuously to close the achievement gap by teaching material that is culturally relevant, keeping track of progress among my students, and changing my own perspectives. We know that opportunity gaps are widening for poor children and children of color, and something must be done about it. So I'm going to strive to create a learning environment that's free of bias and respects the cultures of every student, while changing my own perspectives as well. I will not be culturally biased in my teaching, and I will teach from some perspectives that are often overlooked. I will also always be aware of cultural specific words in my lessons, and ultimately I will ensure that all of my students are safe, respected, and understood in my classroom. I will work continuously to eliminate bias in my classroom. It is so important that educators celebrate diversity and teach students to respect and understand the different cultures around them. I will use the culture as a disability approach and realize that my students come from all different cultures and backgrounds, and I will never punish them for that. We learned in this course that culture as a disability approach suggests that students only appear to be failing because of how society measures them. So my students and I will work together to find similarities and differences between our classroom cultures and their own cultures. And I will teach my students that just because our school culture may be the norm, it doesn't mean that it's the superior culture or the culture that they have to conform to. In order to minimize cultural conflict in my learning environment, I will also educate myself and my students about respecting and understanding other people's cultures, which will really help me to create a safe and respectful classroom that's free of bias. So incorporating pop culture into your teaching can be really beneficial to your students' learning. My goal as an educator, as I've mentioned before, is to create a learning environment that all of my students feel welcomed in. Referencing pop culture is a great way to do this. It can really spark your students' interest, get them excited about course topics, and it can even give students a sense of belonging when it comes to the curriculum because they can relate to it. People learn from pop culture and they construct their own viewpoints around it, so this can really be a helpful tool for teaching your students. Another thing to consider as an educator is core rituals. So I'll be sure to pay close attention to my students' daily routines and make sure that I am creating positive daily rituals in my classroom. Creating these daily, repetitive, and positive rituals for students can really help to build a classroom structure, and it helps students know what's expected of them, which really benefits both the students and the teacher. So, as an educator, I will strive to teach my students in a way that meets their cultural ways of knowing and being to best support their learning. Culturally responsive teaching is so important for effectively teaching students. A huge part of culturally responsive teaching is the idea that if students are taught academic knowledge that aligns with their lived experiences or are in the frame of their reference, the context is then more meaningful, and students will have a higher interest in that material. Culturally responsive teaching can be applied to any learning environment, and I think that it's going to be the key to effectively teaching my students as an environmental educator. Thank you so much for listening to my vision statement, and it's been great taking this course.